Board of Trustees, the powers and duty of the Board of Trustees shall be to supervise and control the affairs of the association and to make effective the action and commitments of the Assembly of Delegates.
Yes, sir.
Well, you're trying to make it effective without considering them or giving them a chance to vote, aren't you?
No, sir. That's not our view at all, sir. We think that their approval of our platform, which we did, fortunately, just this past meeting. Each year we adopt new policy, and then it's the board's responsibility to interpret that policy in terms of issues that come up along the way. So this, I think, is presumably the reason that any association, any organization can speak out on an issue and take a position without having to poll its members all the time. At least that's our thinking.
Well, of course, this is spelled out here that the Assembly...
$4 million has been kicked around all morning. And I'd like to know if our classroom teachers and principals were in on this cut up and divide of this $44 million. I noticed where your university's got 26%, your state college has got 54%, and lower education got 12.2%. Now, it looks to me like somebody done sold lower education out, where your principals and teachers discussed and told what percentage they were going to receive.
They were involved, again, through our representative assembly, through our legislative committee. Our legislative program is worked up periodically and, of course, geared to various years, legislative years. We, according to the estimates we had at that time, sir, we thought that there would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 million available in the surplus at the end of the next fiscal year. We asked for 89 million of that to be appropriated for education. We then, through our legislative committee, agreed on a pro rata or a kind of division of these 89 millions. This was approved by our representative assembly then on recommendation of the legislative committee.
In other words, the 500 people assembly approved that 12.2 for lower education.
Let me make one more statement, sir, if I may, before I answer that question.
All right.
Then the representative assembly went one step further at the recommendation of, I believe, it's Dr. Leroy Brown at that time, who was our legislative committee chairman, that if in the final determination $89 million was not available, that we reduce everything according to a percentage reduction.
Chairman, members of the committee, I would like to read the statement in opposition to this bill. I am Joel Reed, Executive Secretary of the Alabama State Teachers Association, appearing before you today representing the Alabama State Teachers Association, which comprises over 10,000 Negro teachers and educators in the state of Alabama. I appreciate the opportunity afforded me to present the views of... I would like to state our reasons for this opposition. First, this piece of legislation violates the concept of local control. It curtails the autonomy of local school boards in Alabama. Section 1 of the proposed legislation says in part that any compliance agreement or assurance made or given by a local county or city board of education is null and void and shall have no binding effect. This word indicates the loss of local autonomy and permits the Governor's Commission to seize control of local school boards at will. Another section of this bill that troubles us is Section 4. For example, this section states that in the event peace and order of any school is threatened, the Governor and the Governor's Commission are hereby authorized and empowered to make a determination that the peace and order of any such school is threatened and recommend to the Governor that all means necessary be taken to preserve the peace and order of the school. We acknowledge and are elated that the state of Alabama has registered some notable accomplishments in education in the last fact that race is a central factor. Finally, I would like to state that whether this bill is enacted into law or not, there's one fact that will still prevail, and that is Section 601 of Title 6 of the Civil Rights Act of 1954, which provides that, and I quote, no person in the United States shall, on the ground of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program of activity receiving federal financial assistance. Again, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, we would like to express our appreciation for
the purposes that in the area in Tennessee Valley where and that's going to deny to our Board of Education and others who have taken this same step the organization and the planning that is necessary. As a matter of fact, in some counties, the school year has already started. Some of those systems who have undertaken to comply to the extent that they can with the guidelines have already had approved applications for funds. Now, it's noteworthy in that particular phase of this matter that the proposed legislation leaves out the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1945 and the economic aid afforded under the OEO, which is commonly known as a Head Start. Those programs are voluntary programs that the local boards of education do just exactly what you purport to do. I would say that we are grateful for what the legislature has done, but good men of good sense who are trying to be responsible in their duties are disagreeing about this matter. And I know in my own area that the various and numbers of people that I've talked to about the proposed legislation, you will find as many opinions as you talk to people. But we who are in the game
secured some material here that we thought you might be interested in. We were given the figure this morning by Dr. Meadows, and I have no reason to question it, that $24.4 million would be involved in the Elementary Secondary Act. I have about 14 systems in the state of Alabama who are anticipating federal funds for this next year. And with these federal funds, they intend to employ and have employed individuals to teach. Some of these systems are Pike County, $502,598 the program.
And for that reason, we feel that this is a good bill and that we are doing our own thinking concerning this matter. Now, someone may say, well, how does this affect the junior college program? Specifically, at this moment, it probably does not affect it anymore.
I'm going to have more to say about that in a few minutes. The effect of the guidelines is to destroy quality education. Governor Sanders of Georgia just recently protested to the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, to Secretary Gardner himself, as a matter of fact, that an HEW official had come to Georgia and made a speech and said that HEW was not concerned with quality education, but with quantity education. This city or county board of education may, in its discretion, by adoption of a resolution agreed to by a majority of all its members, divest itself of the power or authority to give an assurance of compliance or other plan affecting the maintenance and operation of the public schools, and may refer the question or matter to the governor and the governor's commission for their determination. Now, does that take away the autonomy of a local board? Does that take away the right of a local board to hire and fire teachers, to construct schools, to select the sites for construction, to employ administrative personnel, lunchroom personnel, bus drivers, to buy buses, equipment, maintain buildings, all of these things? Not at all. A local board can be so autonomous it can't stand it any longer, just like this particular board. And it can say, I'm tired of dealing with these folks at HEW, and they've bugged us. We can't carry on our business. We can't do anything. Governor, we're going to turn it over to you and this commission and let you deal with them a while. And that's the extent of the autonomy that a local board gives up, and they give it up completely voluntary by a resolution adopted by the board in a meeting of the board. And I might add this as a lawyer, that some of the pronouncements of the Circuit Court of Appeals in that circuit give us cause for some hope and feeling of optimism insofar as that suit is concerned. Now, I've mentioned something of the tactics of health, education, and welfare. You're going to hear today from some members of local boards of education who've had to deal with these people. And some of the things you're going to hear are going to astound you. You're going to hear in a few minutes from a man who called me last Friday night. And I'd never met this gentleman before. He's a member of a county board of education in a small rural Alabama county in northwest Alabama. And the substance of what he told me was, thank God for what you're doing. And then he proceeded to tell me what they had done and how they had dealt with his Board of Education. And I'm not going into that because freedom of speech. What infringes on freedom of speech more than the propaganda section that I referred to of these guidelines? To tell a teacher, whoever she may be, that you've got to go out here now and do missionary work in your community and in your block and with your neighbors and friends, and tell them, not only have you got to do it, but you've got to like to do it. Go out and sell it to them and tell us that this bill infringes on freedom of speech. The freedoms that are being infringed upon are the very freedoms that we're here today trying to protect with this legislation. We're trying to set up a buffer and a shield between our local school authorities and these people who have invaded our state on the pretext of requiring compliance with a law, and instead are requiring compliance with administrative edicts that have not been sanctioned by the law. I want to leave these amendments with you, Mr. Chairman, for the committee.
Against or the word current. Otherwise, it would appear that you're blanking all regulations. I further recommend to amend Section 2, line 16, after the words Alabama Special Educational Trust Fund by adding the words and phrases, and the copy of this be left with, provided that the entire commission shall not meet as a whole more than one day annually when not in special or regular session, and shall not receive any compensation from the Alabama Educational Trust Fund when meeting during a special or regular session. That would put a limitation on yourself. You put it on everybody else, you want to do that on yourself. And amend the end of Section 3 by inserting the word and phrases. Provide that such executive committee shall not consist of more than 11 members and shall not receive travel expense from the Alabama Special Educational Trust Fund for more than 25 days in any fiscal year at the regular state travel allowance for state employees. I urge that the bill restrict any replacement of federal funds in 1964-65 federal funds as written in the bill. To restrict it to that. I'm for that. It would require, you've asked this question, it would require $38,993 to replace federal funds from the National Defense Education Act and school systems that have been listed by USOE as not qualifying for funds for 1966-67, a little less than $39,000. The total amount involved would be $51,702 by including vocational education. But the state has already replaced federal funds in these school systems out of state funds over and above state funds necessary for matching federal funds, so they didn't lose any federal funds. They're not losing any now for vocational education. If this bill is amended as it should be for a sound bill, in my opinion, the legislature will be back in session next year to further improve the bill as needed. I hope that this bill will help with the problem before us. Thank you. Be glad to try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Bell.
For the State Department.
I signed the state plan for 6566. I haven't signed anything since that.
Have you been requested to, sir?
Sir?
Have you been requested to?
It's been suggested, but I haven't signed anything.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the reason I say that is this. You have demonstrated this already by the actions you have taken.
This is a long and arduous task, as I'm sure you recognize. We did make this determination. We worked with proper state officials, and at the recommendation of officials whose responsibility it is to know about surplus funds and the amount of money in the till, we were told that we could not go beyond $44 million unless we encouraged proration. We did not want to do that. We are on record as opposing that also, despite some unfortunate experiences in the past where there is still some question about whose blame it is. We do not want to encourage that, and we're on record as doing anything we can to oppose any threat, oppose any movement toward proration of funds. And we went with this program. We worked throughout the state hard with you, gaining support for this program. And it was passed, as you know, and we, again, deeply appreciate that. We think that a suggestion was made this morning that those who wanted to come back in could come back in later. Presumably those who went ahead with it, in some instances at least, did feel that they should do this or could do this in terms of their policies. Reference was made also to the possibility of the putting it on a voluntary basis. This might be a possibility. Rather, we wonder why this was not considered to have those who wished to have them null and void be ruled null and void. We think the statement concerning the voluntary action that could be taken by boards to come under this committee is a kind of an open-ended thing. People talk about the pressures they have from their communities and the varying viewpoints. We think the
Compliance Form 441B. If the legislature and governor will act to remove the heavy burden imposed by HEW from local boards of education desiring such relief, then and only then can we once again direct our total effort toward providing excellent educational opportunity for all boys and girls of Alabama. If this is achieved, we will have provided the justification for Alabama's legislature having been so generous in appropriating funds for the school.
We're in favor of this bill because we believe it will provide us the freedom to continue our education in the schools where we're at today. We're willing to give up this federal money if that's what it's going to take for our freedoms that we have today. Because we don't want to yield
$1 million. It doesn't make sense to me, and I'm not too happy about sending my child to people who advocate educational policies such as that. It indicates to me an extreme impractical approach to a problem that needs some cool-headed responsiveness. Gentlemen, I hope that you will pass this bill out of the committee today, and I hope that this legislature will act promptly on it. I think that it is a monetary proposition and a control proposition, and it boils down to this: whether we're going to continue to control our educational system in Alabama, or whether we're going to submit that control for a promise from the federal government to supply a pittance of money. Thank you very much.
And that's the reason that we have established to feel that reimbursing school systems on some basis other than need, as established by this procedure, would be a deviation from this position. And this, of course, is the reason that we want you to know our views on this situation.